Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
And one. Hi, this is Ed Cohen, and today I'm in Palm Desert, California, and our very special guest today is Professor Joe Lurie. That's Lurie, and he's in the San Francisco area. And let's say hi to Professor Joe Lurie.
Good morning. Nice to meet you all, or wherever your time zone is.
I know. Okay. So you have written a book called Perception and Deception.
Right.
And it has to do with cross-cultural stuff or getting meanings communicated better across time, across space, across borders, across cultures.
Right.
It doesn't happen so easy, though, does it?
No, and that's the crux of it, that we're living in a time of such rapid change, technological change, travel, migration. Everything's being speeded up so much that we're all meeting strangers, many more strangers, but we're not really meeting them. And we don't always understand, frequently, we don't understand their reality. So just to pin this up a second, this book, one of the reasons I wrote this book, Perception and Deception, a mind-opening journey across cultures, you see there's an image of a bald head.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what you see when you're standing in line behind a bald head, your experience will drive your perception. So is it a militant, a monk, a punk, or maybe a cancer patient? So, in a nutshell, I'm trying to show that whatever your background, whatever your values, they shape your perception, and in ways very, very frequently, in every single context, can completely distort the reality of what you're seeing. So I'm just going to give you one little, just to tease it up a little bit, Ed, one little example for you and your audience. I'm going to show you this. Can you see that?
Dream is good?
Ice cream is good. Is that what you're saying?
Ice cream. No, ice cream is cut off. But pull it back a little bit.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, half of it.
Right, right. Would it shock you if I told you this is not what it says?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because you don't have the full context. This is what it says. Now, Ed, I know, you're a little skeptical, which is a healthy thing. But if I do this, you see that?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So basically, the essence of this is you're not getting the full context. And I would say whether it's across cultures or in cultures, within cultures, this happens all the time. And things we're used to looking at sometimes prevent us from seeing the larger picture. So last slide for the moment. What does this say, Ed?
I love Paris in the springtime.
Wrong.
I give up.
Read it again. Read it again slowly.
I love Paris in the springtime.
Okay, you missed it again. I love Paris in the springtime.
Oh my God. Look I'm going to take my glasses off. There we go.
Okay, so, you get the spirit of this. So the whole book plays out in showing how these intercultural and intracultural encounters play out in very difficult, sometimes really confusing, sometimes dangerous, sometimes very polarizing ways in every conceivable area, be it in business, be it in health, be it in technology, you name the field, it's happening every day. And you and I just had that experience.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by Porch-like Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlikerental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
Stop dreaming and start living overseas. International lifestyle consultant Emily Braun can help you seamlessly transition to your new life in your dream destination. Whether you are a retiree, a digital nomad, or a mobile executive, Emily Braun can make your transition overseas a success. Visit emilybraun.com.
Coutalis is a global group with a worldwide footprint. With 16 agencies in 10 countries, Coutalis offers companies and mobile professionals a unique combination of HR services and options. Find us at coutalis.com.
Take your communication skills to the next level. Barbara Bolt of Bolt Global has a passion to make you shine. As our globe expands, effective intercultural communication and presentation is a must. Visit boltglobal.com.
Let's talk about this kind of a thing going on right now with the Ukrainian president and everybody thinking about what's Mr. Putin really doing, or is he gone insane, or is he on his deathbed and we don't know it, so he's just going crazy. And then we could look at the recent Abraham Accords in the Middle East, bringing together Israel and Saudi and the Emirates and Morocco. And I mean, who would have guessed all of this? And so how do people relate when it's such a crazy world like that?
Well, I think that unfortunately, too many people, because they don't want to be left with a sense of uncertainty, grab onto what reinforces their biases. So, for example, there are certain people in the United States who, as you well know, are pro-Putin for whatever reason. All you have to do is watch Tucker Carlson a little bit to see that. And then there are other people who go to the end of the spectrum. And, my argument about this is that too often it becomes I'm right, you're wrong, as opposed to trying to understand the other person's reality, right? And the fact of the matter is, you nor I or many of these experts on television, they don't have the full context. So I'm not going to make any judgments about this other than to say that if you're basically siloized in your social media silo, you're only hearing one point of view. And you're not hearing the other point of view, and you're not seeing both silos engaging in a civil way. So what does that cause? That causes polarization, confirmation bias. It's become a cliche. Now, that's not a cultural thing necessarily. It's just a psychological thing, which is being amplified by the reality of social media silos and the fact that we're attracted to things that reconfirm what make us feel comfortable.
So we have biases, and we have the element of breaking through people's minds,
right.
Miscommunications or incomplete communications.
Yeah.
So one of the things that popped out at me when I was looking through your LinkedIn page was the phrase "close encounters." So I immediately thought of the Spielberg movie. So when you use that phrase and that theme, close encounters, it means that you get up close and you still may not get it, or you get it wrong,
right,
just like I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I wrote a little book before I started teaching and doing cross-cultural training. I was working at International House at UC Berkeley, where there are close to 600 students and scholars from 75 countries and 25 US states living together. So that's a close encounter, but it's not a brief close encounter. It's an encounter that's extended, and that can be profoundly transformational. May I give you one example of that?
Please.
So what's different about International House as a residential cultural program center is that you've got activities going on all the time where people are engaging with each other, discovering, not always, but most of the time, their common humanity and other realities. So I remember there were two students who were working in our program office. One of them was a Filipina Christian, and the other one was a Pakistani Muslim. So this Filipina Christian would not speak to him, even though the whole purpose of the institution was dialogue, empathy. She wouldn't even talk to him. Why? because as you know, in the southern parts of the Philippines, there's an extreme Islamist terrorist group. So basically she did what so many of us do. She had a bad experience, so she didn't want to speak to any Muslim. Didn't matter whether he was secular or whatever his viewpoint was, she wouldn't speak to him until she got sick. And when you get sick at International House, you don't go to the dining room. Somebody brings you food. Who brought her food? He did. He did, even though she never spoke to him. So what that did was it opened up a personal human relationship. This was 20 years ago, Ed. Today, they are best friends. The moral, the lesson of all of this is sometimes to open the mind, you have to first touch the heart.
That is great. I think we ought to write that down. Say that again. To open the mind, you have to touch the heart.
Sometimes, or very frequently, in order to open the mind,
I'm making notes here.
You first have to touch the heart. You have to experience somebody else's humanity. And, you know, for example, you want another example of this?
Please.
Again, the power of living together with people who are different.
Day after day.
Day after day. And it doesn't always work. I don't want your audience to think I'm naive about this, but most of the time it's an extraordinary transformation. So now let's go to 9/11. And I was working at International House during 9/11. And there was an Iranian woman who was, you know, she was brought up Muslim, but when she came to the United States, she didn't want to be marginalized. So she converted to Christianity. And she had many Christian and Jewish friends. 9/11 happens, and her Christian friends in particular wouldn't talk to her anymore. So she said, I got to get the hell out of here. She was living in the UC Berkeley dorms. And so she came to International House thinking, oh, I'm going to be with foreigners. I'm not going to be with those ugly Americans, right? Who is her roommate? A PhD student in art from South Carolina. The first day she said, oh my God, I'm going to be living with a redneck. What does she discover? This woman is generous, intellectual, South Carolina, right? Are all of our stereotypes.
Right.
And then, you know, she could have gone on to have hated all Americans because of that searing experience. No, now she has many American friends, many of all backgrounds.
So what's the role of I'm reading my notes here, self-awareness.
What is the role of it?
Yeah. And when you're encountering, you know, confusing things, and your background and your experience is limited, and you don't have exposure, and so you're blocking out the different, and then you're sort of questioning and trying to get along, but trying not to upset anybody. But there's no cohesion though.
Yeah, and this is why it's important to have exposure. In the United States today, we went through desegregation a long time ago. The fact of the matter is, in many ways, our society is resegregated now in terms of neighborhoods, schools,
culture.
Because people are afraid of difference for many reasons. We could have 7 different shows about that. So you're not likely to have self-awareness until you have a triggering experience that says, well, wait a second, what else could that mean? So I'll give you an example. I was in the Peace Corps, you may have noticed, many moons ago, which was, you know, if that was at root where I decided to have a career in intercultural exchanges.
So were you in Africa? Where were
I
you?
I was assigned to go to Kenya at the time. This was in the late 60s. I probably couldn't find, I knew Kenya was in Africa. I couldn't find it on a map.
Somewhere in the east.
Right. So basically we flew towards Nairobi, made a stop in Entebbe, Uganda for fueling, got out in the middle of the night. And the air was heavy. And I said to a fellow volunteer, don't you smell the lions? Don't you smell the lions? Ed, there were no lions within 30 miles of that airport in Entebbe. Why did I think I smelled the lions? Because the common narrative, and it still is, about Africa is safaris, poverty, AIDS. You don't see much about technology and the growth of great urban centers. No, there was no lions. And then when I got to Kenya, My Swahili teacher, because in those days we took 6 hours of Swahili a day. That's the only way you learn a language, right? And basically, my Swahili teacher came up to me and started chatting with me and held my hand. Full disclosure, Ed, I am heterosexual. This man had a conversation with me for 20 minutes and I didn't know what to do with my hand and I was a nervous wreck. I thought they'd send me home if I got rude. What did I learn, Ed? In most parts of Africa, many parts of the Middle East, parts of Asia, men hold hands has nothing to do with homosexuality. Long story short, I got used to it after 3 months. It takes a while. And I was holding hands with my African colleagues walking down the street, et cetera, et cetera. I came back.
So the holding of the hands, that in that culture,
Right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, so just, take it from here. What is that? That's a feeling of
It just is
safety, or just?
No, it's basically, men hold hands and it's just a question of relationships. It's very common. If you were to go to Africa today, you'd see men holding hands all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't African homosexuals. Of course there are. But for the most part, when you see men holding hands in Africa, many parts of the Middle East and parts of Asia, usually it means they're close with each other. Touch is culturally shaped. Touch is culturally shaped. If you and I meet a Japanese person and we really like them and we want to give them a, kind of a California hug or something, don't touch me.
Right.
So body language, gestures, touch, all of these things are defined differently.
Okay. So when you give speeches, whether it's in a classroom or at a World Affairs Council meeting, most of the people in that room, I'm just guessing from my own experience, have something to do with international business, but most don't. They just want to learn something. And they probably haven't been, other than being a tourist on a cruise ship somewhere, that they haven't been into communities. And so I don't know, how do you breach that divide?
Well, now with globalization and many more multinational businesses, more and more companies are seeking the help of intercultural trainers.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you're helping people to understand when you're in a meeting with somebody. Let's say you're an American and you're used to debating, right? Or very common in France, you debate. If you don't debate, something's wrong with you. But in many Asian cultures, it is impolite to contradict somebody. It's impolite to debate. So, helping people before they get together and start working as a multinational team, the whole idea is understand why certain people have certain behaviors in business contexts, right? Just to make a point here, deadlines, right? If I said to you, Ed, I need this report ASAP, what does that mean?
Drop everything, get it done.
Yeah, by when? Define it.
Yeah, right. Well, today.
Yeah, exactly. So ASAP could mean 2 or 3 months because literally it means as soon as possible. So somebody who comes from a much looser sense of time, defining time, might say, but you said as soon as possible. I had other things to do. It's a completely cultural difference in terms of assessing what time means to be punctual, for example.
So if you had this conversation with, get this now, a Mexican, okay,
Yeah.
and there's a mañana thing, that's the same idea, right?
Exactly the same idea. And if you go to Mexico and somebody invites you to dinner and you say, what time? And they say, well, come around 8 o'clock. What that really means is 9:30. They wouldn't have started cooking at 8 o'clock, generally speaking.
They show up.
Yes.
Oh, this is great. Okay, so how many pages are in that book?
That's about 270.
Why so many?
I wrote it before the age of Twitter, before Twitter went crazy.
Well, I'm just wondering, did your publisher say we'll pay you by the page? Or?
No, actually, this is the second edition. It was shorter beforehand. And so what I wanted to do is I added a chapter, and at the end of each chapter, I did activities so that you could engage with what was all of these crazy, inexplicable encounters and try to figure out what is it that happened in that particular encounter that I didn't understand. So that it's meant to encourage conversation and an expansion of your perspectives.
So that was a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago when you were bringing it together.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So you got another one in the oven?
Right now, I think this book is so relevant now that I would rather continue to keep it in the oven.
Yeah. So let me ask you, can you turn that into a TV talk show series?
Many people have said to me, Joe, why don't you do a podcast? Why don't you do this? And, it's just a question of, because of COVID. And I'm also, you may be getting this sense of me. I like to be with people, interact with people. As much as I'm enjoying this conversation with you, over coffee at your house or my house, it would be more dynamic, believe it or not.
It's hard to believe how that could be, but so perception plus deception.com is your site.
Perception and deception.com.
And not the plus.
Deception. Yeah.
Okay. And what do people find on that site? Why should they go there?
Well, basically they get an overview of the book, some reviews of the book. They get a sense of my background. They get a sense of my services, my speaking services, my training services. Who am I? And what I wanted to do was to keep that website relatively simple, how to contact me, because with this explosion of information, how many websites have you gone to where you go to one section of the website and there's a drop-down menu that goes on forever?
Right. I never look at it.
So that's why I have a relatively short website, even though the book is 270 pages long.
Okay, so let's get into this title again, Perception and Deception. And we just had been talking about that in an elongated way. So perception means, okay, just like we saw, like you showed me the half of the word, which I thought was ice cream. And it turns out to be gobbledygook, but and then also the bald head idea. When you think of that, you don't know whether the guy, I assume it's a guy, had
way to go, Ed, you got it.
was balding or something, and then got tired of looking scraggly, so just shaved it all up.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So do you know of whether guys who are bald, do they shine their heads up, or how do they
it depends. Some people, it depends.
I mean, sometimes I get an itch in my head. So do they get an itch?
Some people who have bald heads and they shave it for aesthetic reasons, for whatever their particular aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a story that illustrates this perfectly. I was in Germany with a friend who wrote a book about Israel, and she was giving a talk in Germany about Israeli society, not a political book. Who are the Israelis? And I was sitting in the back next to an Israeli woman who was reading the Kite Runner in Hebrew. Now, in Germany, this was in a Jewish center. Yeah. And there were security all over the place. So as the talk began, the woman who was giving the talk, a bald guy comes in and sits next to me. And I'm thinking, this is possibly a neo-Nazi here, right?
Because of bald.
Yes, and a tattoo. In Germany, context. I had context, but not enough. And so all of a sudden he looks over and he sees this Israeli woman reading the Kite Runner in Hebrew, and he starts speaking Hebrew to her. Who is this guy that I'm scared to death of? I don't think he's a neo-Nazi. He's an Israeli ballet dancer.
That's a mind blower.
I was blown. That's true.
Wow. Okay, so I was, while you were talking, I was thinking that this guy's probably a CIA or Mossad agent or something.
There you go. You see, your reality, your experience is driving your perception. And so here's the ultimate way to explain this. If you have can I do this in 30 seconds?
You take 10 minutes.
Okay. So when I got back from Kenya, I was, I began this journey of self-awareness. You talked about self-awareness. Well, what made me self-aware was the people who told me what I wasn't seeing correctly. And I was in New York. I was living in New York at the time. I was in Central Park walking with a colleague and her 3-year-old kid. And she said, when I first brought my daughter to Central Park, she saw a bird flying in the sky. And she said to her mother, "Mom, where is that bird's cage?"
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
And now, why did that girl ask that question, where's that bird's cage? Because it was the first time she saw a bird flying free, and she had a parakeet in her house in a cage. That was her only reality. And that is the essence of what stops us from seeing clearly. It's the limitations of our experience. I don't care how well-read you are, how well-traveled you are, on some level, you are imprisoned by the limitations of your experience. Why do I keep doing this? Because I keep discovering new things.
Interesting. Wow. So let's relate, if we could, and we come to a close here.
Yeah.
Pardon me. The divide that's in American society now. It's more than black and white.
Right.
I don't know what it is, a multicolor, multi everything. And I believe that's good. But a lot of people are afraid of that.
Yes.
And that's this thing called replacement theory. And of course, it's all hyped, but that was the original fear. And they're probably right. But it's exacerbating, and it's blown so far out and applied to weird things, and it's like pushing a button and something happens when they get into that approach. Those people who are afraid of that. Okay, so this is not political show, but President Biden has a really tough job over the next 6 months. And I think he's been doing great, especially internationally. But pull America together somehow to find a common pathway that others don't see right now. Okay, and I assume he's searching for that. What's that yellow brick road that's not there right now?
Yeah, and that is a daunting task, to create this sense of commonality. Now, so one thing that would do it, and this would be the tragic approach.
So if I may just jump in, what flashes into my mind right now is that story you told about when the girl got sick and the so-called enemy was the one feeding her.
Right.
And they become friends. Right. So that's exactly, I see it as an exact parallel, same parallel.
Right. So two things I think would help to mitigate against this awful deepening polarization, but they take time. But change doesn't happen like this. One is, if the United States came under attack, all of a sudden Americans would, generally speaking, their common ground would be, we need to defend ourselves. If the United States as a country came under attack. The other is a longer term strategy. I don't know, do you remember when you were growing up an organization called American Field Service, AFS International?
Absolutely. It was sort of related to the Peace Corps.
Right. Basically what they took was high school kids, and they just dropped them off in other countries. And after 3 months, somebody went to Finland, lived with a Finnish family, didn't speak any English, and they went to a Finnish high school, and then they spoke Finnish. So, but the other thing that AFS, and that's not it's not an accident that many foreign service officers are former AFS students from 20, 30, 40 years ago. So here is what I think needs to be done. Obviously, if AFS could resurrect, maybe they have, what they call domestic exchange programs, where they'd have a high school student go live with a family, a rural family to an urban area, urban to rural, or a Latin student go and live with a Chinese family, Chinese American family, etc. You just play it out. The act of actually living with somebody who's very different from you and receiving their hospitality, their food, their care, they may differ with you about the Second Amendment, but if they're taking care of you when you're sick, that creates a bond that says, I disagree with you, but I'm not going to shoot you. So
Got it.
that together with this wonderful institution I worked at for a long time, International House, where people from so many different backgrounds on a day-to-day basis are living together. Also, I think every American student nowadays should be required to spend a semester abroad, be required to learn a foreign language. This is the only country in the world where you can get a PhD and it's possible never to have studied a foreign language.
So what about national service? In return for that, then they take care of your college debt or some other kind of debt.
Yeah, national service is another idea because it brings people together who are not necessarily from the same silo. So you're serving a common purpose. Yeah, you don't want to go into the Army? Why don't you help relocate people or help train people to get back into jobs who have no jobs or they're living on the streets? Some kind of common purpose where you're working with people who are different towards a common goal. But this requires a major strategy of reintegrating people. You'll never completely get rid of hate. Let's not be naive about this, but you can certainly mitigate it.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a micro school is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The micro school concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
We're talking with Professor Joe Lurie, and the website is perceptionanddeception.com.
Yeah, one word, perceptionanddeception.com. Yeah.
Okay, why don't you hold up that book cover one more time?
Here it is. All right, let's see.
Okay, and the yellow mind-opening journey across cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah, mind-opening. Wow. And can you raise it up a little bit so we can see the bottom of the head? What's that gold seal?
It was a finalist in a book awards competition.
Good for you. Thanks for being on Global TV Talk Show. and please come back and let's do something more.
Yeah, and Ed, if you see an opportunity for us to, in the spirit of this conversation, have a dialogue with other people with other backgrounds, yes. This would be exciting.
Yeah, this is great. In fact, I want to introduce you to one of my panelists. His name is David, and he lived and worked for a number of years in Russia at a senior investment banker level. And he was president for a long time at the San Diego World Affairs Council. And he's been on several of my shows, and we've had a discussion about Ukraine and Europe and Russia. And there's one coming up. Let me send you info about that.
Yeah, I'd love to watch it.
Yeah, well, be involved in the conversation.
However you want to do.
Yeah, let's see, what day is that? 1 second, I have to do this. June 3, starting 8 a.m. LA.
And will you send me the link? Will it be okay? Can you send me the link to it?
Absolutely. All right, and I'll send you a link to a couple of the shows that David has been on. Yeah. You said you looked at one already. I don't know which one you looked at.
Your most recent one.
No. well, I don't remember. We've in May, so far May's not over yet, but we've done 26 shows.
Wow.
And I've got, after this, between now and May 31, 4 more. So
I'd like to interview you. So what made, let me just ask you this, you know, just edit this out, but what made you decide you wanted to interview people, all kinds of people on all kinds of topics? What drove you to that?
Well, here's the scoop. Really, I'm going to do one of these things. So I have to tell you that I would never entered my mind. And in fact, I was afraid of the camera. You know, is my nose too big? Is my beard, you know, that kind of thing. So, and when I was a kid, I used to stutter. And so this is part of my therapy. Okay, but I've been in PR and advertising forever, since I was 15 in various functions. And I've been self-employed since, say, 1968. So, and in the early days, I was a journalist, and I also did some brief encounters with a TV camera. I was pitching something, you know, I was a kid, so I was talking, you know, about what products kids would buy legally. So, part of my business was producing, you know, I was publishing, and part of that spun off into live meetings with a trade show component, bringing people together who are my customers. And that was in downtown LA. I was a member of the LA Chamber of Commerce. And at the time I was publishing, I'd created and I was publishing California Bound Professional Recruitment Relocation Guide. It's a mouthful. So California Bound, all about destination. Like I relocated myself from Boston to LA in 1980, and I moved my business. And so my business at the time had an umbrella name called US Bound. And I didn't even know what international relocation meant. I knew about recruitment, but I didn't know about all the cross-cultural services and the mind-blowing experiences if one is not prepared. Okay, ruins relationship, if not a bank account. So learned all about that. So we found that the meetings, the live meetings, were great. And my first meeting, professional meeting, that I built and ran was at the LA Chamber of Commerce in their lunchroom. And they were using my magazine as their newcomer, the official newcomer guide of the LA Chamber. It was very successful at that time in terms of product domination, market use, and money. So had a couple of hundred people show up, and the chamber got new members, and they said, "Good job, Ed," you know. And so they used the guide in its various growth iterations, updating across the 80s into the 90s, and then the internet struck, and I said, "Oh shit!" You know, I wasn't ready for it because I was print, right? And so. And then divorce happened, and it was kind of a really bad time, and I wasn't prepared mentally to deal with all that. And but I learned how to do conferences, and it was really easy, and I had sponsors. And so we built a conference business. And so my first international meeting was in '97 in London, and then we did Paris, and we did Frankfurt and Berlin and Munich, and we did Milan and Rome, and we did Geneva and Vevey, where Nestle Corporation was headquartered, and then Basel, where the pharmaceutical companies were. And, you know, everybody was my customer. It was really good. And then COVID came and wiped out that business of 24 years and 350 meetings. And now what? You know, well, I still had the advertising side, and I had a lot of leads and a lot of information from around the world. because of the website that we had. So I started sending them messages and saying, how would you like to be my guest on a TV show? It doesn't cost you anything. And just be prepared to look good and tell me what you want to talk about. And then I'll ask you to talk about it. Then we have a conversation, nothing more. And so we started getting eyeballs. And this was on or about March 1 of 2020. All right. And my last meetings, live meetings, New York City in Times Square at an accountant's office. And my keynoter in that meeting was the HR leader of Condé Nast magazines, right? We sold out. It was a big show. And then the very last meeting, so that was February 25, 2020. And then February 27 of 2020 was my Washington, D.C. event. And it was held on Embassy Row. I had made friends, along the way with a lot of different people. And so the historic home of President Woodrow Wilson was on Embassy Row. It's now a museum, right? And so my friend was the marketing manager, for events and rentals. And she says, why don't you hold your meeting here? It'd be good. So not expensive, and it was a beautiful historic environment. Sold out the place. It was great. That was the last meeting. It was February 27, 2020. And I flew back on Southwest from Reagan to San Diego. And I think I was the only one on the plane other than the flight crew. And they gave me drinks, but we knew something bad was coming. We didn't know how bad. And so what happened was I spoke to my tech partner, Paul. Now, Paul, when I met in San Diego in 2008, he was the chief engineer of the forerunner of internet talk shows, radio. All right, but they called it podcasts, right? Nobody knew what the hell that meant. So it was radio shows, but rather than 98.2 on your dial, it's worldwide. And it's recorded. So you can play it again and again. Now they call it on demand or streaming, whatever. It's crazy names. It's all marketing. Anyway, he was the chief engineer of this thing called World Talk Radio, right? And which has since been sold a couple of times. And so Paul says, why don't you do a radio show? This was in 2008. He says, well, okay, help me. So we've done since 2008, 200 broadcasts. And so I said to him, do you know anything about Zoom? How do you do this? How do you control it? So he said, no, don't worry about it. We'll just get you set up and just talk. But you got to have somebody that you talk to who's not going to
turn people off,
who's not going to look bad. And the prettier the people, the better. So we found them.
Wow.
And then we started doing, so anyway, we've done more than 400 TV shows, some better than others, since March of 2020. And Google Analytics, in their wisdom, measures everything. So they've recorded to date, not including this show, about 175,000 what they call audience page views, which means we're looking at this page, right?
Right.
And if you go to another page, and that's another page view. Okay, so that's how it started. And then I began talking advertising. And not everybody had a budget, or, actually a lot of people are afraid of the camera, and, they don't want to be seen, or, it's difficult, much more difficult than for some people. It's difficult to be in front of a camera, and it's difficult to find financial footing doing this. But I've had advertisers, sponsors since day one, and most of them are still with me. And we've gotten new. So the latest thing is that have finally put into play. I've been thinking about it for like 4 years anyway, not just 2 years. How do I generate recurring revenue from what I'm doing? And the answer is, and again, following Hollywood, subscription model or memberships. And so
Right.
I've been following the public broadcasting TV shows and radio, but mostly TV, and how they sell their memberships, all right, through subscription drives. And they bring in Andreas Bocelli, and they bring in John Denver, and they bring in Downton Abbey, or whatever it is, and people tune in. And then now they have advertising on these PBS stations, but they still sell their subscriptions. And the more you give, the more thank you gifts they give back, right? All right, so I've adopted the exact same system, and I've rolled it out. So I'm calling it Global Press Club, all right? And people can join on an annual basis currently. There's only one form. It's like the Model T Ford was black, that was it. So someday I'll make other colors and versions, but right now it's a yearly thing. So we just officially rolled it out March 15 or so, on our 2-year anniversary of doing this. We've got a few memberships, but now I'm figuring out how to market it better. Each day there's new feedback, and then I'm adapting the thing. So my plan would be to get 10 a month will be fine, because the price is, relatively speaking, it's low. And if it ever scales to 100 a month, I'm going to have to hire people because that'll be another problem. And so I figure I can manage everything by myself up to between 10 and 100. So what it is, it's a monthly thing whereby the members get my PR attention, and I have different websites and vehicles, including advertising space and including TV talk show interviews, as well as being a guest on other shows. So there's always business connections being made that they might ordinarily never have the opportunity. So I'm offering a service program of 365 days, 12 months. And throughout that period of time, they will have 24 TV shows, 1 a month radio talk show interview. They can publish an article or a news item or a blog or a video or company news or an opinion piece or a white paper, 1 time a month on my site. And for the whole year, we'll give them banner ads on each of my 5 websites.
Right.
So for people who think about doing PR and never do, or they take stabs at it and then they get busy and do something else, it's an organized system.
Yeah.
And so the engineering of it, if you will, is I'm convinced it's foolproof, and I be the fool because I'm the one who has to do the work.
Sure.
So anyway, that's a story. I could send you a link to a bio interview I did with a friend of mine. She's a psychiatrist, and
okay.
So I've recorded it with her, but I haven't made it public.
Well, you can edit certain things out.
Too much work.
I got to tell you, just briefly, my father was in advertising. He also was raised in Boston. Do you remember the commercials for Geritol?
Sort of, from the old black and white TVs.
Yeah, right. And do you remember the key phrase for Geritol?
Oh, not right now.
Tired blood.
Oh, that's right. Tired blood.
You're speaking to the son of the man who created that.
And that's what people remember.
Yeah, Tired Blood. The other one that he did, which was, this one is faded a little more. I don't know if you remember Serotan. It was for constipation. Serotan. Nature is spelled backwards. That's my father.
It's exactly the kind of shtick that I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to put a button on that, I think the real challenge, because, I'm not a PR professional, but I'm an excellent networker and I have good PR instincts, is that there are so many people out there craving to get the attention while, all of these tools are out there to give you attention. How do you stand out among all of these people? That is really the challenge.
Good point. Yeah, and I think the system that I have, as long as, so that thing that's out there, maybe you haven't noticed, but there's a company out there that was started by some women in the garment industry in New York, and so they have these fashion shows in Milan, in New York, and Paris. Right, and all the dress designers and Vogue magazine and all that are there, and so you have these models walking down the runway wearing these clothings, and then supposedly it becomes a hot item. Who knows? Or somebody knocks it off and sells it at Ross for less, But so they formed this company called Rent the Runway, where they take designer fashions and change them and then mass produce them and then sell them at a discount online. Wow. Only online and through Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Right. No retail.
Yeah.
Right. Rent the Runway.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do was, and I haven't gone public with it, but hello, audience, rent my audience.
Right. Ooh, interesting. That's an interesting idea.
And so, because I've got an audience,
yeah,
and it keeps building with people like you who would like to have this vehicle,
of course, sure.
At least for a minute, and then somebody may want it for a year, right, and join my club.
That's a very powerful phrase. Rent my audience.
So I've been afraid to use it because I put a TM on it, try to scare people away from stealing it, but. Not that I have a legal budget, but I'll find a lawyer who will take a contingency on that one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
and particularly defining the audience and making sure you're targeting the people that would want to rent your audience. In other words, it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be just kind of, just throw it out there. What's the nature of your audience that is going to attract particular people who would want to rent the audience?
And while they're doing that, because we give them the show that they're on one time a month or more, they can send it out to their own network and build their own audience.
Right.
So not only will they be able to rent my audience, but also they could use it to build their own.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's double barreled.
Yeah, double barreled.
Anyway, I really enjoyed meeting you.
Yeah, the same. Okay, so I'm going to put on my calendar June 3rd.
Starting 8 a.m. California.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting your psychiatrist.
I have to correct, she's a psychologist.
Okay.
But a PhD.
Nice to meet you, Ed. Thank you very much for your interest.
Be well.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.